The desert wind sang that day, low and mournful, carrying dust and secrets over the land. It was late summer in Arizona Territory, 1878. The sun had long since baked the red earth into stone and the horizon shimmered with heat. A lone rider cut through it, a cowboy with a tattered hat, a revolver on his hip, and sorrow in his eyes. His name was Elias Kane, a man who'd seen too much and spoken too little. Once he'd worked cattle out near Abilene, laughing under starlight with men who'd all since gone to dust. Then came the war, not one fought by nations but by greed, gold, and men hungering for power. Elias had walked away from the blood, taking only his horse, his guilt, and the kind of silence that could choke a man. For days he'd been trailing a lost path through Apache country, looking for work or maybe just an end. His horse, Dust, moved slow under the punishing sun. Elias didn't know where he was headed, and truth be told, he didn't care much anymore. The land stretched endlessly before him, cruel and magnificent all at once. He came to a ridge where a narrow river wound through cottonwoods, silver as glass. He dismounted, knelt to fill his canteen, and that's when he heard the sound, a faint, sharp, like flint striking steel. He turned. The air felt heavy. Something or someone was watching. Out from the trees stepped a woman. Not just any woman, but one who moved like wind over sand, silent, certain, wild. Her long black hair was bound with leather and feathers, her skin bronzed by sun and freedom. In her eyes burned something between fire and grief. She carried a bow in her hand, an arrow notched, aimed steady at his heart. "Don't move," she said in a voice both sharp and melodic. "You are trespassing on Apache land." Elias raised his hands slowly, careful not to reach for his gun. "Didn't mean no harm," he said, his voice gravel low. "Just passing through. Looking for water." "White men always say that," she replied. "Then they take more than water." "I'm not that kind," Elias said. The woman studied him for a long, still moment. Then she lowered her bow slightly, though her eyes never left his. "What kind are you, then?" "The kind that's tired," he said simply. For the first time, something flickered in her gaze, a curiosity, maybe even pity. She lowered the bow completely. "My name is Aiyana," she said. "It means a eternal blossom, though nothing lasts forever in this land." Elias nodded, his hand steadying his horse. "Elias Kane," he offered. "I've heard the stories about the Apache. Brave people. Fierce. Fierce because we must be," she replied. "White soldiers burned our villages, took our children, called us savages for defending what is ours." Her voice trembled on the edge of rage. Elias looked away, shame pooling in his chest though he had never worn a uniform. "I'm sorry," he said. "Sorry does not bring back the dead," she said flatly. Then she turned her horse, a beautiful white mare, and mounted in one fluid motion. "Wait," Elias said. "If you'll just point me to a safe path." She looked down at him, her expression unreadable. Then, with the faintest curve of her lips, she said the words that would haunt him forever. "Get on my horse, handsome cowboy." Elias blinked, taken aback. "Beg your pardon? You wish to live?" she said. "Then get on. Soldiers ride this way. They will not ask who you are before they shoot." He hesitated, but the urgency in her eyes left no room for doubt. He swung up behind her on the mare. The moment his hands brushed her waist, she spurred the horse forward, and they flew through the trees like spirits escaping the living world. They rode for what felt like hours, the wind burning against Elias's face, the rhythm of the mare's hooves echoing his heartbeat. When they finally stopped at a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley, the sun had begun to sink, painting the world in molten gold. Aiyana dismounted, tying the mare to a juniper tree. "You are far from home, Elias Kane," she said without turning. "Home's a place I lost a long time ago," he said. "You can't go back to ashes." She glanced at him then, a hint of understanding softening her features. "You speak like a man who has buried too many." He gave a dry laugh. "Seems we've both done that." They camped there that night. Elias built a small fire while Aiyana cleaned her arrows. Silence stretched between them, not empty but heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Coyotes howled in the distance, and the stars came out one by one, a bright, cold, endless. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "You saved my life back there." Aiyana didn't look up. "Perhaps I only delayed your death. Soldiers do not stop hunting." "You trust me enough to bring me here," Elias said. "That counts for something." "I trust no one," she replied. "But you were broken by. You look like a man running from ghosts." He smiled faintly. "Aren't we all?" For a moment, their eyes met across the flickering firelight. In that fragile space between them, something began to stir, a not quite love, not yet, but a recognition. Two wounded souls finding the same kind of ache. Days passed. They traveled together, avoiding patrols and following hidden trails through canyons and scrubland. Elias learned that Aiyana's people had been driven from their village near the San Pedro River. Her brother, Tuzi, had been captured by soldiers weeks earlier, and she was searching for him alone, relentless. "You could be killed," Elias said one morning as they rested by a spring. "The army doesn't take kindly to Apache rescuers." "They took everything from me," she said. "I have nothing left to fear." Elias saw the way her hands trembled when she spoke her brother's name. He'd lost kin to a younger brother shot in a mining dispute, a mother who died waiting for letters that never came. He knew that kind of pain. It burned slow and deep, like a coal that never died. "You shouldn't go alone," he said finally. "Let me help you." She turned to him sharply. "Why? This is not your war." "No," Elias said. "But I'm done walking away from every fight that matters." Aiyana studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes reflecting both defiance and something softer. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Very well, Cowboy. You ride with me?" And so they did, two unlikely companions bound by loss and purpose. They reached Fort Hollister 3 nights later. The outpost sat on a dry bluff, its walls of timber bristling with rifles and lantern light. Elias and Aiyana watched from the shadows of the hills. "They'll have guards posted at all hours," he whispered. "I know," she said. "Tuzi will be inside the holding pens behind the stables. How do you plan to get in?" Aiyana smiled faintly. "The same way the wind enters the canyon." Quietly. She moved with the stealth of a cat, her body merging with the dark. Elias followed, every nerve alive. They slipped through the rear fence, past dozing soldiers and tethered horses. The camp reeked of whiskey and sweat. Somewhere nearby, a man laughed, and Elias's hand went instinctively to his revolver. When they reached the holding pens, Aiyana froze. Inside one of the cages lay a young Apache man. His wrists bound, his body bruised but breathing. "Tuzi," she whispered. Her brother stirred, eyes widening when he saw her. "Sister," he rasped. "You should not have come." "Quiet," she said, cutting the rope with her knife. "We are leaving." But before they could move, a voice barked out, "Take hold," commanding. "Hold it right there." They spun around. A soldier stood at the gate, rifle raised, his face red beneath his hat. "Well, I'll be damned," he sneered. "A savage and her white lover. Ain't that a picture?" Elias's eyes narrowed. "You don't want to do this." "Oh, I do," the man said, grinning. "Orders are to shoot any Apache on sight." He cocked the rifle, and Aiyana moved first. The arrow flew before Elias even heard the bowstring snap. The soldier's grin froze, then vanished as he fell to the dirt. The camp erupted. shouts, gunfire, chaos. Elias grabbed Tizzy's arm and hauled him up. "We've got to move," he yelled. They ran through the confusion, dodging bullets, the night exploding with flame. Elias shot twice, hitting a lantern that burst into fire, buying them precious seconds. They reached the stables, where the white mare waited, stamping and snorting with fear. "Get on!" Aiyana shouted. Elias threw Tizzy up first, then swung behind him, pulling Aiyana up last. The horse surged forward, leaping over the burning fence, into the darkness beyond. The sound of gunfire faded behind them, swallowed by the roar of the desert wind. They didn't stop until dawn. The three of them collapsed beneath the rocky ledge, exhausted and alive. As he lay sleeping, his wounds tended by Aiyana, Elias sat nearby, watching her hands move gently over her brother's skin. "You were right," he said softly. "You're fierce." She looked up, smiling faintly. "You are foolish, Elias Kane. You could have died tonight." "Maybe," he said. "But I reckon I'd rather die for something than live for nothing." For a long moment, she just looked at him as the stubborn, broken man who'd stood beside her when he didn't have to. Then she reached out, fingers brushing his cheek. "You are not like the others," she whispered. "Neither are you," he replied. Their lips met, then a slow, hesitant, like two rivers finally touching after miles apart. The kiss carried dust, tears, and something like redemption. When they pulled away, the sun was rising, a gold spilling across the desert like mercy. The days that followed were quieter. They moved north, deeper into the high country, where soldiers rarely rode. Tizzy recovered slowly, though his spirit burned bright. Elias and Aiyana grew closer, their bond shaped not by words but by the silence they shared, the kind that feels like home. But peace in the frontier never lasts. One evening, as the three of them camped near a dry wash, Tizzy returned from scouting with grim news. "They are coming," he said. "Soldiers. 20 men. They tracked our trail." Aiyana's face hardened. "We cannot outrun them." "Then we fight," Elias said, rising to his feet. Tizzy nodded. "We make our stand here." They prepared through the night, setting traps among the rocks and hiding their horses in the ravine. When dawn came, so did the soldiers, a dust rising like ghosts behind them. The battle was swift and brutal. Arrows flew, rifles cracked, and the air filled with smoke and blood. Elias fought like a man possessed, his revolver roaring in rhythm with his heartbeat. Beside him, Aiyana moved with deadly grace, her bow singing vengeance. But numbers were against them. Tizzy fell first, struck by a bullet to the chest. He died in his sister's arms, whispering something Elias couldn't hear. Aiyana's scream tore through the canyon, raw and terrible. She rose, firing arrow after arrow until her quiver was empty, until her arms trembled and her tears ran black with dust. Elias saw a soldier take aim at her, and without thinking, he threw himself between them. The bullet tore through his shoulder, spinning him to the ground. "Elias!" she cried, crawling to him. Around them, the last of the soldiers retreated, leaving the canyon littered with the fallen. He tried to smile, blood staining his lips. "Guess a broken bar, I'm still tired." "Don't you dare leave me," she said, pressing her hands over the wound. "You'll be fine," he murmured. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever known." She shook her head, tears falling. "You are a fool, Elias Kane." He managed a faint grin. "You told me that before." Then his eyes drifted closed. When Elias woke, it was night again. The firelight flickered above him, and Aiyana was there, tending him. His shoulder was bound tight with cloth. He tried to sit up, grimacing. "You live," she said softly. "Seems I do," he said, voice hoarse. "Tizzy?" She looked away, her silence answer enough. Elias bowed his head. "I'm sorry." She wiped her eyes, setting her jaw. He died free. That is all he wanted. They sat together in the silence that followed. The fire crackled. The wind moved through the canyons like an old prayer. At last, Aiyana reached for his hand. "You could still leave," she said. "Go back to your world." He shook his head. "My world's gone. This one's all that's left." She smiled faintly. "Then stay." And he did. Months passed. Together they built a small life in the shadow of the mountains. Elias hunted and mended fences. Aiyana gathered herbs and carved patterns into stone. Sometimes they rode through the valleys together, her white mare and his brown stallion running side by side, wind whipping their hair. There were still dangers, soldiers, bounty hunters, the unforgiving land, but they faced them together. And in the quiet moments between storms, they found something neither had believed possible: peace. One evening, as the sun sank behind the red cliffs, Aiyana looked at him and smiled the same fierce smile she'd worn the first day they met. "Do you remember what I said to you?" she asked. He chuckled softly. "Something about your horse." She leaned closer, her lips near his ear. "Get on my horse, handsome cowboy." Elias laughed at the sound, rich, alive, full. "Thought you never ask." They rode out into the dusk, the desert blooming around them with light and shadow. Behind them, the ghosts of the past faded into the wind. Ahead lay only the horizon, a wide, open, endless. And somewhere in that vast silence, the world finally felt like home.